As backpackers, the most important thing to note about traveling India is how affordable it is. We stayed in a hostel that cost less than $2 a night, and you can get a plate of good food for less than $1. We spent entire weeks eating, exploring, and paying for our accommodation for less than $20. I'm sure you can stay in a five-star resort in India and get an entirely different experience. But India got such a strong backpacker community, and you would see hostels everywhere and budget travelers from all over the world, which proves how cheap India can be. And that makes affordability our number one favorite thing about India.
Another thing at the top of our list for India is the culture. And by that, I really mean the culture shock. If you have never experienced culture shock before, let me tell you, it is a funny feeling. It is kind of addictive. We really love the feeling. We have never been to another country that has such a profound and overwhelming sense of culture shock as India. We saw and did things in India that we honestly feel like we will never be able to see or do again. Even the simple act of walking down the street is so profoundly different in India. It's a rich and unique experience. It really is a travel experience just walking down the street. You've got people dressed in bright, traditional, colorful clothes. You've got some of the most insane traffic we have ever seen, where if you're on a scooter, if you're not honking, you're not driving. Everybody's honking. You've got this symphony of horns everywhere. You add to that the fact that cows are wandering through this traffic and they're rummaging through huge piles of garbage because there really isn't much of a social stigma on litter. It really is a beautiful chaos that can be so hard to describe and really overwhelming at first. But once you can see the beauty in it and learn to enjoy it, it is some of the most profound and addictive culture shock you will ever see. The feeling of culture shock for me is the reason why I'm sure I will be back in India one day.
With this unique culture comes the ability to really feel yourself, push your boundaries, and really grow. It can be very challenging to travel India. To be clear, India is the most challenging place we have ever traveled to. But as a result, there are times when you really feel proud of yourself for overcoming these challenges and you can really feel yourself growing.
We also found the history of India to be really interesting, mostly because it's so accessible. There are these medieval military forts where you can wander through, you can get an audio guide and listen and learn to the brutal wars that were fought exactly where you're standing hundreds of years ago. There are buildings, cities, and even lakes that are deeply connected to the Hindu religion, sacred places to explore. And my favorite part of India, by far, is Varanasi, which they say is the oldest city in the world, and it's probably the most spiritual. At least three religions were born there: Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. Wandering along the banks of the Ganges River, looking at all the holy men, looking at all the local tourists who have traveled across India to bring their family to this historical, spiritual place, you really get a sense of how rich and how interesting and how profoundly important the history of India really is.
We also loved Indian food. From street food to restaurants to the cooking class we took to learn how to make our own curry. We also did an entire video on the mangoes in India as they are the best in the world. Unfortunately, there are limited options of food outside of Indian food. Eating curries every day can be a little tiring, especially if your stomach cannot deal with the spice. And sometimes you just crave for like a good burger or pasta or even Chinese food, which is rare to find in India. Which lead us to...
So the number one thing we did not like about traveling India, our least favorite thing about traveling India, is certainly the frequency of the scams. Now this is going to be hard to talk about. I'm worried the comment section will turn into some hateful thing, but Yvonne and I talked about this, and if we are going to make this video trying to prepare travelers for what they might expect in India, we absolutely have to mention the scams. I understand that every country has scammers. I understand that every country has something called tourist pricing, which is like they see you and they say, oh, you're paying more because you're a foreigner. I'm telling you, in India, it is on another level. Ivana and I literally had a list, a document, a piece of paper of rules to remember when we're purchasing something. Every single transaction, every time you reach for your wallet, you have to be diligent You have to be firm, you have to argue, you have to negotiate aggressively. It's just something I'm not familiar with. In Canada, I might negotiate the price of something once a year at the most. Prices are non-negotiable. I found myself negotiating the price of a scoop of ice cream at Baskin Robbins. I'm certain Baskin Robbins doesn't have negotiable prices, but the guy working there decided today all the scoops were twice the price for me. Literally every time I reached for my wallet, I felt like I was getting scammed. You really have to be firm. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to say, no, sir, that's not fair. We made a deal. You said it was 300 rupees a night for this hostel. 3 nights later, and it doubles the price. And you say, no. You really have to be diligent not to get tricked. You have to be firm. And that's just the way it is.
Traveling as a woman was very challenging. I often find myself to be the only woman out on the street, and I saw probably like one woman for every 20 men, and maybe that's why I felt uncomfortable every time I was out on the street by myself without Steve. But even with Steve around, I felt like every man had their eyes on me, and I always dress modestly in India. One event that I would not participate in again is the Holi festival, which is the festival of color. We celebrated in Jaipur, and don't get me wrong, it was a beautiful celebration with colors and music, but I had a very bad experience. It was too crowded, and it felt like it was just an opportunity for men to grab me without being obvious. We did, though, come across a few groups of really helpful men who literally made a human shield for us to move through the crowds. They knew that a foreign woman was going to be a target. But overall, Holi is something that I will skip when I go back to India again.
The pollution in India was something I was just not prepared for. Being a Canadian, I have almost no experience dealing with huge amounts of pollution. Obviously, Canada and India are vastly different countries. Canada is a huge landmass with a tiny population and low levels of poverty. I don't think you can compare the two, but my point is I just had no experience with something like this. There's certainly an incredible amount of noise pollution, which didn't bother me too much. I found it kind of amusing. If you're in a big city in India, you will hear people honking horns 24/7. It's kind of unbelievable and almost funny. There's certainly air pollution. Within 2 days of being in Delhi, India, I got a sinus infection. If you Google up the air quality index, Delhi's air is some of the worst in the world. Hard to breathe. But both of those things don't hold a candle to the amount of garbage and litter. It's really disheartening. To be blunt, to be honest, it just made me sad. It just made me sad. At least 5 or 10 times we saw young children throwing their garbage down, and their parents are with them, and their parents don't say, hey, don't do that, let's put it in the garbage, let's take it home with us. So it seems like Indian people just don't have the same view of litter as I do. Certainly not a judgment. It's their country. Do whatever you want with it. It's just, from my perspective, I was unprepared for it. It made me feel sad. There's just so much garbage. My favorite place in India, like I said, is Varanasi. Varanasi is a special place. It is the holiest access point to the holiest river. There's people telling me the Buddha himself sat along this river, right in this location, dreaming up the Buddhist religion. Guru Nanak, which is a guy who invented the Sikh religion, one of the founders of Sikhism, he sat right here. There's people who really believe that there are ancient vibrations in Varanasi that are healing, and they'll change your mood and they'll change your personality. Like, this is such an important, beautiful, amazing place, Varanasi, and there are parts of it that look like a landfill. It just makes you sad. Construction garbage, household garbage, food garbage. You see diapers and animals picking through the garbage right along the shoreline of the holiest access point to the holiest river. It's just disheartening.
Other than the pollution, the poverty in India was very overwhelming. We saw many beggars, children, and adults, and we felt sorry for them at first and really genuinely want to help. But many beggars were also scammers. Things like faking injuries and sad sob stories are common. The worst thing is, they aggressively grab you if you don't give them any money. One lady even came up to me asking for money, and when I said no, she would follow me around and she would grab me. So when she grabbed me, she said she didn't want any money, she just wanted food. So then we passed by this fruit stall, and I bought her a strand of bananas. But she said no, she didn't want it because she wanted mangoes, the most expensive fruits on the fruit stall. So, I mean, like, how can you be so picky about it? I just felt like she was ungrateful for my help. So, I mean, I would feel bad at first for not being able to help, but after many experiences like this, I just had to stand up for myself, and I would often say no when beggars or a homeless person came up to me.
To be honest, just to add on to Ivana's, the way people approach you in the street is just different than any country we've ever been. A lot of countries, people are selling things. Hey, do you want to buy this? You say no, thank you, and that's the end of the conversation. It would be hard to have an issue with that. But in India, it's not uncommon for them to grab your arm. They will follow you down the street, really trying to sell you something. And the other big one is, like, conservatively, we were asked for like 150 or 200 selfies when we were in India, which doesn't seem like a big deal. They just want a picture of a foreigner, okay, like 3 or 4 times a day. But most of them don't say hello. They don't ask you any questions. They immediately just want a picture with Ivana. They walk up to me and they have their phone in their hand and they go, picture with your wife? And it's just like, I understand it's a different culture, but it's just something I'm not familiar with. I would never go up to a man I've never met, not introduce myself, not say hello, and say, can I take a picture of your wife? It's just, after a while, it gets bothersome, and you just feel like saying, I'm just trying to go to the Taj Mahal. I'm just trying to go to the fort. I'm just trying to go to the waterfall or the lake or the touristy thing. I'm just trying to go there. Can you please just leave me alone, man? Grabbing your arm, approaching you. It gets difficult to just get down the street and get to your location. So that one was really tough for us too.
So, in conclusion, India is a great place to travel, providing you're up to the task.
Right.
I mean, if you are backpacking for the first time, I would not suggest India to be the first country you visit because it was challenging for us. We've been to like around 20 countries before we landed in India, and it was challenging for us.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I would recommend checking out some other countries, getting off the beaten path, getting into the backpacker lifestyle, getting more adventurous, and then working your way up to India. India has like this huge reward you can get. It's such an interesting place, but because of the huge reward, there's like a risk reward factor where the risk is quite high. We've heard from tons of travelers who went to India and they didn't like it, they had a bad experience, and they ended up leaving. I feel like if they were more prepared for what India has to offer, they could have learned to love it.
You have to be strong mentally and physically to be in India.
Absolutely. Everything you do in India is an adventure, even something as simple as leaving your hostel, walking down the street, going to a restaurant and eating. On the way there, someone could be grabbing your arm trying to sell you things. There could be a herd of cows blocking traffic to the point where there isn't even room for foot traffic, and there's 100 scooters lined up, and all of the 100 scooters are not moving, and all of them are honking their horns. It's hilarious. You're just standing there for 10 minutes listening to horns and breathing in terrible air. And then when you get to the restaurant, maybe the same thing you ordered yesterday is now twice the price.
Yeah.
Or none of that could happen, and the guy who owns the restaurant could really help you and invite you to his home, and an amazing thing could happen.
Yeah, you'll never know what happens.
You'll never know. There's these hugely interesting rewards you can get, but it's also very taxing. There were days, more than a couple days, where we couldn't leave the hostel. Like, I can't even go outside today. It's so tiring. It's so hot. Everyone's just trying to sell me something and grab my arm. I'm just like, I can't even do it. We would literally stay in the hostel all day.
It's so exciting that it could be exhausting.
Good. That's totally well said. So, would recommend. It's one of the only countries, maybe 3 or 4, that we've been to that I'm certain I'll be back to.
Yeah.
It's an interesting place, and it's so big that we haven't seen even 10% of it.
Yeah, it's so big. India is a big country, and we've seen like the northern part.
Yeah.
And Pune.
That's it. So there's lots more to see. I would recommend traveling India, but you've got to be prepared.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for the air quality. It's the biggest one that frustrated me. We landed in Delhi, and right away I was just sick, and I was like, what am I doing in Delhi, man? We left Indonesia, which is like paradise on earth, these small islands where it's like so clean. Ivana speaks Indonesian. We get around so easy. Left Indonesia and landed in Delhi, and I was like, what a change.
And don't get me wrong, there are scammers in Indonesia, but the scammers in India is like on another level.
Totally
They're
right.
like,
Totally right. You can work through it. Lots of people travel India and have a great experience. You can certainly overcome it. You've just got to be prepared.
That's right.
One of the ways we
Yeah.
would meet other travelers is when you're waiting for a train in a train station, you go to the other couple, tourist couple, and you just say, so how was your experience buying your train ticket? And they're like, oh, let me tell you, train tickets and bus tickets are like so hard to
Yeah.
buy. You have to really be aggressive and really be
Yeah.
firm, and it's just so tiring. It's something I'm not familiar with.
All the tourists, other travelers we met in India will have a scam story. All the
100%.
travelers we met in India has
100%.
scam stories.
We consider ourselves like good experienced travelers, and we got scammed like 10 times,
Yeah.
15 times, and we could have got scammed like 100 if we weren't such experienced travelers.
But
It's just the way it is.
we would
But there's-
really recommend.
But there's so much more to explore there.
Visiting.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful place. It really is.
Beautiful country, lots of culture and history, and they're
Yes.
beautiful,
Yes.
delicious food. Although too much curry every day can be a little bit tiring.
Right. We talk a lot about travel and vacation. We had no vacation experiences in India. Vacation being relaxing and like me time.
Yeah.
But travel experiences, like pushing yourself beyond your limits. We walk up in Varanasi, India. We walk up to this place where they're burning human bodies on wood, and they're like welcoming us, so inviting, so friendly. He's like, "This is my father, 75 years." Oh my goodness! Like watching a human body being burned on wood. It takes like 8 hours to burn.
Yeah.
Like what a travel experience! Off the chart, amazing travel experience.
being India.
It's just not a very relaxing place.
Being in India makes you more grateful for what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's also
Absolutely.
a life lesson being
Yep.
in India, you know?
Yeah, and whatever you love about travel, you'll love India, because
You'll
India
learn-
is like the pinnacle of travel. It's
You-
difficult,
yeah.
it's rewarding, it's challenging. You'll push yourself, you'll grow, you'll think things you never thought before, and experience things you never saw before.
That's true. You learn to be more patient with yourself, with other people, with
Yes.
the environment. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
All right, thanks
Yeah,
for watching,
so-
everybody.
Visit India. It might not be your favorite country, but I promise you it'll be a memorable one.
Certainly memorable. Well, that's well said, Ivana. On that note, we'll end off. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next vlog. Stay safe
Subscribe.
and subscribe.
Love
Bye-bye,
ya.
everybody.